Welcome, everyone. And my name is Greg Orloff, and I will be your moderator today. Thank you for joining us for the 1:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time session, What OEMs Can Learn from Verizon's IoT Product Strategy, sponsored by Losant. Now, please take a couple of moments and familiarize yourself with the tool if you're not already. Check out the functionality. There's a Q&A portal, and there's also a chat portal or window here on the tool. I'd ask that all of the questions get submitted through the Q&A block. This is an interactive session, so we will be opening it up for Q&A later on, so feel free to submit those throughout the session. Chat, feel free to add to your heart's content what content you want in there. Today's session is being recorded, and it will be available on demand in 2 days from now, and we'll be sending out a follow-up email after the fact to remind you of this. I just wanted to bring your attention as well to several future dates. You want to make sure you put on your calendar. June 16th is IoT World's Smart Cities Day. August 12th is IoT World's Energy Day. October 6th is IoT World's ICS Cybersecurity Day. And then last part of the year is December 8th. We'll be bringing back IoT World's Manufacturing Day round 2. So please mark your calendars and register when you see those come out. As I mentioned, we're taking Q&A at the back of the session. You can submit the questions here in the window, Q&A window in here, or you can also send them in to us via Twitter or LinkedIn using the hashtag IIoT World Day. Once again, that's hashtag IIoT World Day. This track will run for 45 minutes, and I promise to have you out of here on time. Now, the thought leadership you're about to receive through these virtual conferences would not be made possible without our sponsors. So thank you to Aliantia, Canvas, Eurotech, Hitachi Vantara, HiveMQ, Fortinet, Losant, Trend Micro, Ursaleo, Vertex, and WellAware for sponsoring today. Now, before we get into it, I'd like to give you a little bit of a background on IoT World, just for some of the folks that may be joining us for the first time. We're a leading authority on industrial IoT topics, and IoT World is a digital media outlet bringing the latest industrial Internet of Things, virtual conferences, and content to a global community of over 270,000 decision makers. IoT World publishes daily content written by subject matter experts, focusing on topics such as industrial IoT, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, predictive analytics, digital disruption, and machine learning across multiple industries, including manufacturing, which we're here to talk about today. We host a series of virtual events that punctuate the calendar and draw thousands of delegates. Now, with our housekeeping out of the way, please allow me to introduce Brandon Cannaday, co-founder and chief product officer from Losant, to lead our discussion. Brandon, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Greg. Thanks, everybody. So what we're going to be talking about today is kind of an IoT strategy that we really don't hear from that often. And it's really about how OEMs and specifically manufacturers can think about using IoT in maybe a little bit different way than they might otherwise. Greg, can you give me that next slide? Thank you. And the next one. Awesome. So who's going to be talking today? One is me. I'm Brandon Cannaday. I'm from Losant. We're an IoT product development platform. So really what we do is we help organizations bring to market their own IoT products and services. But really, I'm not going to be talking that much. I've invited David to provide a perspective from Verizon, who's actually doing this, leading this initiative within Verizon to create their own products and services. Just like manufacturers would, and some of the products they're creating are actually designed for the manufacturing environment. Yeah, next slide, please. So before I pass it off to David, I kind of wanted to set the stage, kind of talk a little bit about what it means and why somebody like Verizon is coming to talk about manufacturers. And when I think about anyone in the IoT ecosystem using IoT, they're really doing one of two things. Either they're consuming IoT or they're providing IoT. And an IoT consumer is somebody using the technology as part of their own business process. And when we think about manufacturing, usually we're thinking about an IoT consumer, somebody improving efficiency, reducing cost, or maybe mitigating risk. But what I wanted to use this talk for was to try to get manufacturers to think a little bit differently about their IoT strategy and think about ways to become an IoT provider. So a provider of IoT is a company that is delivering the technology directly in the thing they manufacture. So this is particularly valuable in industrial equipment manufacturers and OEMs. And, if they're able to think about ways to deliver the technology as part of their product, gives them new revenue, recurring revenue opportunities, gives them some competitive advantage, extends the value of the equipment they sell from kind of a, one-time equipment sell to equipment plus a value-added service. Get that next slide, please. So this is really why I wanted David to come talk about his perspective, because Verizon has done a really good job of doing this transition themselves. They've been a consumer of IoT for a long time. They monitor cell towers, all that stuff. But recently, they have decided to make that switch and start to provide IoT, provide these products and services to their customer base. And Verizon, especially in the manufacturing environment, has a really unique perspective because the products they are building are sold to manufacturers. So that's why I invited David here to really present this topic, because he shares that unique perspective of both being a provider and a provider within the manufacturing environment. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David. David, take it away.
Brandon, thank you so much for having me, and Greg, same to you. So by way of intro, I'm David Vasquez with Verizon, and I'm really happy to be discussing not only our IoT strategy, but our experience with Lucent and the platform and their incredible team, and hopefully discuss it in a way that's valuable to OEMs, equipment manufacturers that want to provide a differentiated service to their end customers. Currently, I look after the development of the industrial ecosystem for private wireless, that's LTE and 5G, and our MEC, mobile edge compute. In plain English, I work with developers, OEMs, and end clients whose application need dedicated, private, super fast connectivity and low latency to deliver an optimized outcome. This helps developers and OEMs who are challenged by inadequate or non-existing connectivity on site. It helps end clients by not having to touch, reconfigure, or re-architect an OT environment, and it helps everyone by segmenting the network and bringing compute closer to the source. For the context of this chat, my experience with IoT started in around 2010. I don't know that makes me an expert, but anyway, I started in 2010 with CDPD, that's circuit data, packet data, which had been around since the 90s. And it revolutionized, take this with a hint of sarcasm, it revolutionized the taxi industry, for example, by letting would-be passengers use a credit card with a larger-than-life terminal haphazardly installed in a yellow Crown Vic in New York. But good luck telling the cabbie that once you want him to take you to the airport that you're gonna pay with a credit card. This is, for you kids, this is before Uber and before Lyft. But this ability, this network, this ability to manage data wirelessly turned into CDPD modems providing low-speed connectivity to RTUs, so remote terminal units, and other data acquisition and control devices. We just were not calling it IoT then. And when I say low speed, I'm talking about 19 kilobits per second at best. But hey, we were effectively connecting devices and sending data remotely. So it's like the early days of IoT and IIoT, so Industrial Internet of Things. Since then, we've made some strategic moves to advance our IoT business. Some of the highlights include in 2010, we launched an LTE network, which at the time, they didn't really have an IoT impact, but it got us to start the discussion of migrating off 2G and 3G to enable more bandwidth-hungry IoT use cases. 2 years later, we acquired Hughes Telematics, which signaled the market that we were getting into the telematics business. By the way, this business now contributes to Verizon north of $250 million a year, and we've made other acquisitions in that segment since. In 2015, we launched ThinkSpace, which I'm going to talk about today, is our ThinkSpace platform, which simplify the management, the provisioning, and security of IoT devices. About a year ago, and I'm almost done with the history lesson here, so bear with me because I want this all to make sense. But about 4 years ago to the date, we launched Cat M1. It's a lower bandwidth, less power consumption IoT network that works off LTE. And this brought about the enablement of these low power use cases, but with the coverage and capacity of LTE and much cheaper. We bought a drone company, we've launched 5G, we created a telco edge with partnerships with AWS and Microsoft, and just recently acquired Incubed IT out of Austria to optimize services for autonomous robots. Coincidence that autonomous robots need low latency and nearby compute and a lot of bandwidth? I think not. So, now with the history lesson over, Brandon did a great job of framing this consumer of IoT to provider of IoT journey. So one consumes IoT as part of their business process. So for example, we consume IoT data from our fleet to better schedule truck rolls. The other one provides IoT as part of the things they build. So for example, we provide critical visibility into equipment and machinery enabled by edge gateways. So I like to use this journey, this framework, if you would, to illustrate what hopefully you could learn and apply to your business from our IoT strategy. Greg, can we move to that one slide that I have, please? So as a services, solutions, and communications provider with a strong ecosystem, we already knew we could replicate success in IoT as well if we did things just right. So, we have this platform that we call ThinkSpace, and it helps, and I'm going to go from the left to the right. So it helps devices. So these could be actuators, gateways, router, but they could also be embedded sensor in a VFD, in a variable frequency drive or motor. It could be a process and control equipment, etc. So we have these devices and we let them safely connect to a network. So again, this could be a traditional cellular core, so LTE, M1, narrowband IoT, etc., but also wired in the case of us providing a router or a gateway. So, those Ethernet devices also count. And we do this to get into the blue box. So we are facilitating the entirety of the management, the verification, the authentication of these devices to ensure proper operations. Through our own development, we also made it easier for the community to consume data from these devices and via API hooks connect with ThinkSpace. And look, it worked. We got customers, we got developers, and we also got a ton of application development requests. Some wanted better visualization of the data. Others wanted better device identity. Think of PLC tags, right? Device identity. Some needed a production environment workflow tool. And the idea was they wanted to bring business logic to the application they were trying to build. And all this success and customer feedback drove us to make a decision as to how we should support these requests. How do we enhance ThinkSpace to automate and facilitate the IoT experience from the device management, which again, we were doing, but all the way to application enablement. I mean, we could do it. We have the staff, the know-how, the money, but did we really want to build this ourselves? And I suspect that by now, you know the answer to what happened next, being that I'm here talking about Losant. So we ended up partnering and integrating ThinkSpace into Losant's application platform to facilitate all these things customers wanted. So, if you look at this slide and, on the top right, you see applications. So we're hooked into Losant right now. What are some of the benefits? So besides not having to stand up an internal team, so we didn't have to stand up an internal team to do this work. That means that that's a benefit to us, obviously. A benefit to the developer community was that they got to cut a ton of time from POC to production And to us, this means faster revenue because if we make it easier, they're going to keep coming back to us, and they have been coming back to us. Also, some of the benefits is that now you have equipment OEM experts leveraging their know-how with better tools. Specifically, here's a clear example. Visualizing machine data, not through an HMI on site, but on your mobile or your desktop while remote, and being able to make recommendations to drive an efficiency, or to use Brandon's words, to mitigate risk. And whether you are old school and you pick up the phone and call this person, or you choose to automate the changes, this brings value to the whole chain. So that's kind of how we had this platform that was doing incredible things, and we made the decision to partner instead of build this internally. So a lot of the things that you'll see that we're doing with Lawson are part of our integration, and they're helping us a ton on the application enablement side. Greg, we can quit sharing now. So today, and fair warning, I'm going to plug us here, Lawson and Verizon, but OEMs and equipment manufacturers could also take advantage of this partnership that we've got by checking out our CBM. It's condition-based monitoring. Now, I say this to provide market evidence, not so much a marketing plug, but I'll tell you this: it is now easier than ever for machine and equipment OEMs that do not have a large IT staff, that do not have a DevOps crew, that do not have an unlimited supply of field techs, to act proactively instead of reactively, instead of after the fact when it comes to machine and equipment repairs. We've made it easy to proactively and securely monitor any edge gateway device, streaming data from sensors, presumably in your machine or equipment, but also external, in near real time to let you assess conditions, recognize red flags early on, and deliver alerts to automatically trigger maintenance. From a business discussion, who's doing as an equipment OEM, as a machine manufacturer, after you sell the machine and the machine gets installed, the equipment gets installed, who's doing your maintenance today? Who's maintaining that equipment? Is it a trusted integrator that's trusted by the end customer? Is it a distributor that's local to your end customer? If so, how do you collect information about the maintenance work delivered so that you can use this data in consideration of your own product development? How much do you get from the maintenance work performed? Do you figure out a rev share model, or you're not part of that chain anymore because someone else is fixing your equipment? Is the distributor doing that? How long do you have to train them, or will have to train them, before they can properly maintain the equipment you're manufacturing? So, all these questions, and where I am going or trying to go with this line of questioning is to convey that there is value today for a machine and equipment OEM to have visibility over installed gear. There's business value, there's customer value, there's competitive value. And in the context of our IoT strategy, this type of enablement is exactly what we set out to do many, many moons ago. And Lawson has helped us get there faster. And these things are in market today. So the combination of an IoT platform and a combination with the ability to easily develop applications and turn this into services and things to share with customers, has really accelerated this journey. Greg, how are we doing? Okay on time? Do we want to take a couple of questions before I share the next example?
Sure, we're doing great on time. We can probably kick it off. We've got a couple questions that are coming in. There's more coming in right now. Maybe let me kick it off and catalyze it a bit. IoT has several business models. You can go per device, bandwidth based, et cetera. How did you determine which one to use? And when you found one model, did you find one that worked better than the others? If you could maybe walk us through that But David and Brandon, if you want to chime in as well, it'd be fantastic.
I'll take the first stab, and then because we can chat about this. So now, specific to condition-based monitoring, which I just highlighted, we chose the as a service model to lower the entry barrier known as CapEx. So we provide this as turnkey, and where needed, we can go as far as discussing day two support, meaning break, fix, survey, etc. CBM aside, today, you could look at our published rates and find the combination of technology, which also dictates speed. So, is it 4G, is it M1, is it narrowband, will it be 5G soon? And also data consumption in terms of, how much data you need. And if you want to discuss different pricing models, again, CapEx, OpEx, combination of, we're super open to that. And this also turns into, leaving Verizon, this also turns into a question for the OEM, for the equipment manufacturer. What would you consider a new business model to be? If you had the capabilities to remotely monitor equipment and see what it's doing and make a recommendation, would you position them differently to your customer? What would their reaction be if you tell them, hey, I used to sell you this kit as a one-time SKU, as a one-time sale, but now I offer you a maintenance service? What would their reaction be if you are having a discussion about, the industrial vats that you make for chemical mixing? What if you can charge per use? What if you want to charge per yield? Do you want to talk about SLAs? All these possibilities from a business model perspective are opened up and enabled by IoT today. So that's how I would answer that question. But I think Brandon will have a different and likely better answer that I can ever come up with anyway.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. In IoT, really it's going to be as a service. So almost every business model we see is some form of as a service. There's a little bit of interest, and people seem to be attracted sometimes to, sell the equipment and then basically have some kind of lifetime access to a service. That's a dangerous path to take because there is ongoing costs back to the provider of that service. IoT usually involves some cloud services. You have to store, you have to process the data that's ongoing it just costs that continually exists. So if you offer a device or a piece of equipment and then you provide kind of a lifetime service with it, that can come back and haunt you. If you've got a customer that now has had that device for decades, they're still getting that service for free, you're still paying on the back end. When it comes to the subscription model, we see two really popular ones. It's either per device. So, you buy a piece of equipment, I'll charge you $5 a month, $10 a month, and you get the data service with it. That will require a little investigation, like David had said, for, how much value your customers receive and perceive from that service. Telecommunication, telecom companies, they really like that data-based because that's kind of how a lot of their machinery is already in place. We'll just charge you for how much data that piece of equipment generates. The other one is, David touched on it very briefly, but is kind of allowing you to really take a drastic change in how you sell your equipment. You can kind of transition to a machine as a service model. So instead of selling your equipment, like, hey, here's a big generator, it's $100,000, sell power as a service. The generator is free. What we'll charge you for is how many kilowatt hours you produce using that generator. Air as a service. I've even heard of lift as a service from crane manufacturers. Like, we'll just give you the crane, however much you lift, because that's really what determines the wear and tear on the crane that I'm renting you. So you have those opportunities to kind of completely, and that really changes from a pure CapEx model to a pure OpEx model. So if you're trying to explore, changing, how your bills are paid, that's another opportunity there. The entry level way, kind of the first step, is probably a very straightforward subscription service that's kind of added on to the equipment. Here's my generator. By the way, we've got this add-on service, $5, $10, $100 a month, whatever you think it's worth. That gives you a lot of that historical real-time telemetry data into how that generator or whatever piece of equipment is operating.
No, interesting perspectives because there's a lot on the business side. I think we're seeing that in multiple different areas as well. The water sector is doing the same thing in some of the starved areas of the country, California and those regions. I know out in Napa, water as a service, right? Rather than just calling up your local utility and asking them to provide. How maybe talk to us a little bit about availability. I mean, you hinted on 4G, 5G, the network types, David. Where are you on that horizon? I mean, if you've got or how easy or difficult is it for an organization to switch, if they needed to alter the model that they were doing on the back end? Any insight there?
Yeah, I mean, it's the reality is, so if we're talking about delivering connectivity over a public wireless network, so Verizon say 4G LTE or Cat M1 or narrowband IoT, this LTE has been on the ground now since since 2010. So the coverage is there, and you're seeing 5G also nationwide. But in the context of IoT, look, let's be honest. I might have if my $100,000 generator is going to be on one site, I don't really care about global connectivity or nationwide connectivity. Is there coverage at that site in East Texas or in Alaska, in wherever it is? And so we already know what the limitations are, but some of the advances and things that we're seeing, and lucky enough I get to work on, is now we're seeing these private networks being built. Now, again, if you're in the oil and gas business or a utility, private networks are nothing new. What's changed is that now we have spectrum availability, we have different spectrums, and effectively the makers, the OEMs, the Nokias, the Ericssons of the world, that have helped us build the infrastructure that's needed for public cellular. Now a manufacturer can have their own private network dedicated for their machines with security and SLAs and all that. And on the back of that, because IoT is tied at the hip with this on-premise connectivity, we are effectively having these conversations like, hey, so if you're solving for on-site connectivity, if you're solving for security, bandwidth, and edge compute for that matter, what are the things that we could be doing in factory to drive IoT and industrial IoT? Because now we have, from an ecosystem perspective, a lot of these applications and gateways that could be enabled by this network that we're bringing in. So folks can leverage the public networks that we have built today, and they will also be able to leverage the private networks that are being built for industrial customers today. And it takes a quick search for you to look at how many are being deployed globally. This thing's happening right now, and this is really good for us who need that connectivity to be reliable so that we can get data from machines into the hands of an operator or an OEM.
Yeah, David, I can
go ahead.
launch off of that just a little bit. We've seen, especially for industrial equipment manufacturers that are kind of baking IoT into their equipment and selling it, the public networks have been a great fit for that, because really what that means is the equipment is connected out of the box. So they manufacture it, they ship it to the customer. There's really no setup on the customer side. So once it enters the environment, if it enters a factory environment, like a factory floor, the customer may want a little more control in the network. If it enters like a fielded equipment, so construction equipment or even generators behind hospitals, stuff that may not be near available to a customer network, just putting the cellular right in like the edge computer, the gateway that's kind of introduced in the enclosure, has been a really good kind of inexpensive fit. Really lowers that configuration barrier. That's a kind of a really big mental block sometimes. Like, how hard is it going to be to get this equipment, smart? If it just comes from the manufacturer already smart and already connected, that has been a really successful approach.
And one more on that, because we've had this chat with OEMs, and here's the reality: an operator I don't care how cool, great your machine and your equipment is. You just don't go into a site and plug something in, right? I mean, that's just sometimes for good reasons, that local network, that OT network at your customer site is just not available to any new equipment. And if it is, it's a long process. Are you talking to IT? Are you talking to OT? So one of the things that it's solved is that if you have your equipment and it comes with connectivity baked in, you don't get to have that discussion. You can tell this customer, hey, this thing will not plug into your network, period. End of story. So it removes some of that friction, yet lets the OEM, the manufacturer, and that end customer enjoy the benefits from that connectivity without too much hassle most of the time.
So let me jump back in for a second, David. When you kind of rewind back into your decision process, how did you decide whether to use a platform or to build something internally? Walk us through that decision matrix, or if you could.
You mean before or after we started to struggle? Just kidding.
That's right.
It was a speed question. It was a speed question. How fast do we go to market? And then follow the business case. So if we set out to, let's just say that we decide, no, we're going to do it. All right. So we're going to need resources, and we have the resources. So, but did we want to stand up resources to do this in-house versus the total addressable market for IoT that we knew we could acquire, and would we make money? The answer was yes. Okay, great. So we can do it ourselves. We're still going to make money. Awesome. Next question. How soon do we want to make money? Now? Oh, wait, we want to make money right now? Then we're not doing this ourselves. Let's get help. And again, and here I am, having this chat with Brandon and Lawson. So it's kind of a true story, but it was a speed. It was a go-to-market driver that made us decide to use a platform that was already built versus us doing it ourselves. Speed, hands down. And we are happy with that decision. Famous last words.
Hey, David, I've got a specific question that I want to make sure you get to, because I think you got a really good perspective on it. And certainly a lot of OEMs, a lot of people that want to become, start selling their own IoT product struggle with is, how did you decide what to build? How did you approach customers? How did you distill it down into, the minimum viable product that you decided, yep, that's what we're going to build and go to, take to market? Because a lot of times that's one of the biggest upfront struggles is, companies want to be, forward thinking and want to offer these products, but then they're kind of stuck at like, well, what makes sense? What would be the highest impact? So what kind of process did you guys use?
Great question. So we are lucky to serve, tens of thousands, well, on the consumer side, 100 million customers, but on the enterprise side, we are very fortunate to serve the largest global companies. And a lot of these companies are in some sort of, they make things, manufacturing industry. And in having discussions from, that belong inside and outside of our portfolio, some of the things that always came up were from the equipment maker community, their need to be able to get data from devices. And this started early on with telematics, right? Like I have a rig, I make a yellow iron, I make farming equipment of different colors. And we saw the data was valuable for many things. But definitely, disparate, lots of noise in the market as to, what you could do. So we did a lot of external market research and a lot of basically talking and listening to our customers to decide that we wanted to be in the business of facilitating all OEMs of getting data from the things that they make so that they can, honestly, not just make money, but provide a better experience. Simple things like the ability to be able to tell a customer that something's going on with their equipment that isn't sustainable, that will lead to a failure, that's huge value. Because those of us that have been, in front of manufacturers, everyone's got a different number from downtime. And whether you're talking to a large Fortune 50 manufacturer, or you're talking to a small aeronautics parts manufacturer here in the Northwest, downtime is huge. So all of this feedback, all of the value and the potential value of solving these business problems like downtime, like outages, like how do I dispatch the right person with the right tools to do the right job, made us decide that this condition-based monitoring realm is a place that we wanted to be in, and with a little bit of help, we are there. We're there today.
Oh, very good. Well, we've got a couple questions coming in from the crowd. Before we dive into these, maybe I'll ask one, any piece of advice in the spirit of that. After going through this process and this evolution, I mean, if you had one thing to share, to a manufacturer who was looking to embark on something similar, David, and Brandon, what key insights would you give them? Lessons learned, toe stubbings to prevent, if you will.
Talk to Verizon. Okay. Besides the biased answer, I would say you should have a business discussion around the what if regarding your ability to monitor your gear while in use by your customer. And if you have enough what ifs that will drive value and differentiation, then I will go talk to an existing customer and share the what ifs and ask them flat out, do you see value? Would this make your life easier? Would you consider testing a few what ifs and giving us feedback? So get that validation, then come talk to us. If you don't want to talk to us, look, there's an amazing IoT community out there. It's just, we're better, not biased. But that's what I would say. Figure out what are those what ifs and ask them for your customer, and you'll be surprised. And it's so refreshing to be able to have these conversations with someone who's already giving you business, because they're very honest. They want you to be better too. So that would be my advice. What are the business what ifs? Go ask a customer, and then come talk to us as to how to deliver on that what if. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that advice is perfect. Mine is essentially piggybacking on that. Definitely talk to the customer, figure out what they're asking for, and then start small. Especially if you're going from a non-connected piece of equipment to a connected piece of equipment. I think you'd be amazed at how little you actually have to do to add an impressive amount of value. Something as simple as, extracting the sensor information is probably already in the industrial controller, just Modbus, CAN bus, whatever it is, tap in there, pull that out, really no change to the equipment itself, getting that up to the cloud, and then doing some pretty simple heuristics, alerting is very valuable. It really changes the way somebody can use your piece of equipment. But we've certainly sat around a table. It's really common to get a bunch of executives in a room and they start brainstorming and they come up with this enormous solution that will take years to build, where if you can just get down to like the critical piece of value and start there, because your customers will love it and they will immediately tell you what they need next, and that can kind of drive your roadmap. So I like what David said, certainly talk to the customers, and then I'll add on to that, kind of, start small.
Well, thank you both. We've got a question from Richard, and you're seeing a couple of surveys pop up, so please take a moment and give us some feedback on that in terms of the tool as well as the session content today. And please feel free to be candid. We can't grow if we don't get the good feedback that we need. So maybe if I go to his question, so what are your recommendations for companies that have developed IoT initiatives with internal resources to get to POC, possibly even MVOP, but don't have the skill set internally to launch as a commercial product that will scale across all users and beyond?
That's such a great question. It reminds me of when we started to use words like shadow IT, right? You have folks in a company that understand a challenge because they're there, they're living it, have no resources, but hey, let's do something, between us, a little POC that's harmless, which most of the time it shows value, but then it's like, I don't have a sponsor, how do I scale this? How do I take this to the C-suite, right? I mean, so it depends. This has a lot to do, I suppose, with your company's culture and your company's politics, right? To be honest, one approach could be this evidence that you have gathered with your small but valuable POC. How do you present this to a stakeholder in a way that you match to a KPI that they care about, right? We talk a lot about, I mentioned the word business case a bunch of times. And how do I align a business case to a business KPI? Down to, is it OEE? Is it uptime? Is it cycle time? So POC, data, evidence, I can help drive this efficiency to this KPI. If you do that, that should give you a stakeholder. Who cares about that KPI? Who hurts when that KPI suffers? So that will be one approach. And now if you have the executive support, the executives are on board, then again, back to maybe talk to us. Maybe this is, your POC is something that we've done 7,000 times already. And we can show you evidence really quickly, or be honest, like, oh, you know what, like for this niche thing, like we don't have too much experience, but go talk to this shop. I mean, this is the type of community that I know, Lawson and Brandon and Charlie and all other guys, and same for us at Verizon, that we would steer you in the right way. So stakeholder, and if it's resources, again, start with us, and if we cannot help, maybe we'll give you a name.
Yeah, I think especially in manufacturing or industrial kind of ecosystem, it's really common for the companies to not have the types of skill set inside, cloud developers, a lot of web developers. It's just not kind of the engineering work those companies have done. So certainly we see that all the time. Company can do their own POC and kind of prove the value of what they're doing. And then usually the next step is, they can come to us directly. We do have a professional services group. Verizon has a professional service group. We've actually partnered up with Verizon, where their professional services group is building a product for them or their customer kind of on our platform. But now we are seeing a lot of kind of bespoke professional services, web development groups really coming up with skill sets tailored to IoT, really from the embedded firmware up through connectivity all the way into the cloud side. So you'd be surprised at how common it is. And there's a really good ecosystem out there of partners that can really help take your POC all the way to a market-ready solution.
Oh, great insights. Thank you both. I think we've probably got time for one last question. We're about 3 minutes out. Looking at some here, we have, okay. This kind of goes back to your comment earlier. This one's from Alan. He's asking if you're foreseeing the independent monitoring services for IoT, not home IoT, analogous to those that you see in the telehealth sector. So any foreshadowing or crystal balling there?
How do I, because I know we only have a couple of minutes. The companies like us, when we put forward IoT services, monitoring is just an integral part of it, because when you break it all down, there's and back to that slide that I showed you, you have many pieces of the puzzle. There's devices, there's a network, there's orchestration, there's an application, there's clouds. So from a monitoring perspective, we provide the documentation as to what monitoring services we offer, alongside with some of the things that we do with Lawson for for CBM. So I would point you to just Google ThinkSpace. There's a lot of documentation, and you can find more details as to what it is that what it is that we monitor. And if there's something obscure, you're able to reach out to us and contact us via the ThinkSpace webpage.
Yeah, the telehealth is a pretty big area, so it's tough to know what area to really hone in on. But I think what might be one of the more interesting ones is kind of shareability of data. You know, the exchange of information between doctors and hospital is pretty good in healthcare. That does really not exist in industrial IoT. And I think that is a huge opportunity, especially when we think about complex supply chains. If you're higher up in supply chain, you know, how do you get all that telemetry data, telematics, telehealth data from everyone lower in the supply chain in a secure way, and you know, make sure you're not sharing competitor information and things like that. So we're kind of in the very early stages of something complex like that, but you know, we're getting there, and there's some really interesting opportunity in things like that.
Well, that sounds like a great place to conclude. Brandon, David, thank you both for tremendous value, some great insights there. I truly enjoyed speaking with you both. Special thanks to Losan for sponsoring this session, and again to our event sponsors, Aliantia, Canvas, Eurotech, Hitachi Vantara, HiveMQ, Fortinet, Losant, Trend Micro, Ursalia Vertex, and Wellaware. Your support ensures that we have all of this great content to share. Thanks to our attendees for listening and engaging in the Q&A. And I also want to remind you to invite you to our networking and key takeaway session from 6 to 8 p.m. this evening, hosted on Clubhouse. The details to log into that you can find in our agenda. So one final request, I think if you haven't done so already, please fill out the surveys for the session so we can keep on with our 5S and improvement. And now it's time to move over onto our next session, augmented reality and 3D visualization use cases in manufacturing. So once again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.